Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, copy.
Deja vu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of shows that were later rebooted. This is season 1, which we're calling In the Zone, discussing the Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about season 1, episode 13, titled The Four of Us Are Dying. And The Four of Us Are Dying, it originally aired on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1960. It was directed by John Bram, written by Rod Serling. This is another one based on a short story. We've seen a couple of those in the last couple of weeks. It was based on a short story by George Clayton Johnson. And it stars Harry Towns, Philip Pine, and Ross Martin.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance of things and
Suddenly up ahead,
just cross over. You're moving into a land, another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Okay, and here's the opening voiceover from Rod Serling for The Four of Us Are Dying. His name is Arch Hammer. He's 36 years old. He's been a salesman, a dispatcher, a truck driver, a con man, a bookie, and a part-time bartender. This is a cheap man, a nickel and dime man, with a cheapness that goes past the suit and the shirt, a cheapness of mind, a cheapness of taste, a tawdry little shine on the seat of his conscience, and a darkroom squint at a world whose sunlight has never gotten through to him. But Mr. Hammer has a talent discovered at a very early age. This much he does have. He can make his face change. He can twitch a muscle, move a jaw, concentrate on the cast of his eyes, and he can change his face. He can change it into anything he wants. Mr. Archie Hammer, jack of all trades, has just checked in at $3.80 a night with 2 bags, some newspaper clippings, a most odd talent, and a master plan to destroy some lives.
Another opening narration, by the way, that just completely eviscerates the main character. And then the IMDb description of this episode, which I think is pretty fitting and good, is a man who can change his face to look like other people, uses his ability to improve his life regardless of his effect on others. That's fair.
I would say a man with the ability to change his face uses that ability for random things that may or may not improve his life or hurt other people with no seeming logic to what he's doing with it.
Or man who changes face somehow picks the worst face to change into every single time he fixes his face. And for some reason does not choose a more attractive face for his base face.
What about man who can change his face, doesn't have any reason to, but the episode has to go 25 minutes, so keeps changing his face?
Should
we give a little more summary for people who didn't watch the episode? I'll try to get this in like 30 seconds or less. Cool. The man can change his face. We see him in the opening voiceover in a hotel room. He's got a couple newspaper clippings of people who died, like they say, murdered or killed in accident, whatever. So first he changes his face to look like a musician who's died, goes to this club where he finds the musician's girlfriend and tells her, hey, meet me at midnight at the train station. We're going to get out of town. And she's, ecstatic that he's back alive and says, yeah, I'll meet you. Then he goes back to his hotel room, changes into the face of a gangster who was killed, goes to, I guess, like the mob boss, tells him off like, you had me killed and left me for dead floating in the river, and I'm taking this money, and takes a bunch of his money, runs away, is getting, and in both of these sequences sort of end with somebody's chasing after him. In the first case, it's another musician who recognizes the dead musician. In the second case, it's some of the mob boss's goons. And in both cases, he changes his face to look like somebody else when they catch up to him. So they're like, oh, I guess we got the wrong guy. And in the second of these cases, he changes his face to, after the goons were chasing him, to look like a picture of a boxer that was just sort of like up on the wall, like behind him when he got chased into this alley. So it was the first face he saw. Comes out of the alley, and conveniently the boxer's dad is there, like running a little newspaper stand, and tells him off about what a horrible life he had and how he broke his mother's heart and did some wrong to some girl. And then and they have this confrontation, and Hammer, in the guise of this boxer, ends up sort of throwing the old man to the ground, goes back to his hotel room, is packing up, I think, to go meet the girl. We'll talk about the plot because it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think that's where he was headed. And then out of nowhere, a police officer shows up to tell him he's under arrest for some crimes committed in Detroit. As the police officer's like taking him down, they go around a revolving door and he changes his face again. So the police officer's like, wait, did you see another guy come out here? And goes back into the hotel looking for him because the police officer's an idiot. But he changed back into the face of the boxer, and the boxer's dad has apparently followed him to the hotel, is outside with a gun, and shoots him for all his past sins. And that's the end of the episode. Does that about hit the plot points?
Yes, and in 30 seconds or less.
Such as they are?
Yes. I think
I feel bad saying plot points. Does that hit all the things that happened on screen?
All those things happen. I think
our more clever listeners might be picking up that we did not love this episode.
Which is strange because John Bram, who directed this episode, directed Time Enough at Last and Judgment Night, which are two episodes that I think we really loved. And this was, I feel like we've had a little bit of a stretch of not great episodes. And
well,
go
ahead.
This was another pretty unlikable protagonist, as we heard from another very aggressive and long opening narration from Serling, where he just rips this guy pretty badly. And not only do we see the bad guy of this protagonist from what we see in the episode, but he also manages to turn into all these people that are also awful people. And one of the things I was thinking throughout this episode, I'm like, what are the odds that he keeps taking on the appearance of all these other horrible people? Wouldn't he just accidentally at some point take on someone that is not awful? But
maybe
no.
It's a commentary on the fact that most people are awful, and
True.
so if you just randomly change into people, most of them are going to be awful people.
True. Couldn't you?
I want to give a little defense to John Bram here. I looked up the director after watching it, and I mentioned to Mike before we started recording, the giveaway for me was it was yet another matte painting too close in the background, which is, I guess, John Bram's trademark that we saw in his prior two episodes. But both of those episodes we actually liked quite a lot and thought were very well done in most ways. And we, poked a little fun at the matte painting, but generally they were well done. And this is one where I'm actually tempted to show it to some of my students when we talk about like writing versus direction, because I felt like John Bram did about the best he could with this material, and the script just wasn't there. I actually thought the execution of it, like he found interesting ways to shoot things. There's a couple of nice practical effects in here with him changing faces and doing some sort of clever camera tricks to make that happen. So I thought Bram did a reasonably good job. It's just this script did not make sense, and he was kind of working with bad material.
That's fair. And I do have in my notes, I don't even remember where in the episode it popped up, but I have another horrible matte painting in my notes. I can't remember if it was like a cityscape, like at the back of a city that they were trying to show extending. Do you remember what?
It's when he's when Hammer's getting chased by the mob goons, and they like chase him down this sort of dead end alley, and he gets like faced with a wall because the alley just sort of ends, and the camera cuts to show them coming towards him, and they wanted the alley to sort of extend off into the distance, so there's, a half a block of alley set and then matte painting behind it.
That's right.
It was less obnoxious than the one in Judgment Night where the guy was literally like standing at the matte painting, like with his shadow on it.
Right.
So
true.
This was a pretty normal use of matte painting, but it just jumped out. I'm like, is this going to be the same guy? And I did look him up. He's directed those three, but then he did 9 more episodes of The Twilight Zone of ones we haven't gotten to yet, but we'll see him coming back again.
I hope you forget those names of those so you don't cheat on that there's going to be...
I already forgot the names of them. I just looked and it said like 12 episodes of Twilight Zone. But I will say, like, in all 3 of those, including this one, I would say, I would keep hiring him too. Like, he seems to find ways to get a lot out of a TV budget and make these things look kind of more complicated and bigger than they are. I don't know what the exact budgets were, but we know they're doing a weekly TV show in, late 50s I know it was aired in 1960, January 1st, but it would have been shot still in the 50s. And I think he does a really good job working with the material he has. And on most of the episodes, whether we like them or not, you know, sometimes we've poked fun at the plot and such, we've generally felt pretty good about the writing. And I think this was the first one we've seen where I really, there's a couple of nice dialogue lines and stuff, but the story is just so not there that it really jumped out to me. Because other ones that I haven't liked, it's generally been there's too much plot or not enough, or it goes too fast or too slow. And this was one where the whole time through I have no idea what's going on.
This just came to me. I would have looked it up if I had thought about this before this episode, but
no, you wouldn't.
I feel like I would have. The last couple that we've watched, that I feel like there's a little bit of a correlation with the last few episodes that we have watched and they haven't been our favorites, and the fact that they're based on a short story. And this is another one that's based on a teleplay or a screenplay or whatever, teleplay or short story. I'm sorry, the teleplay based on a short story that we have seen in a row. That is, maybe it's part of it is that it's not coming from an original Serling idea, that he's retrofitting someone else's idea into this concept, I guess, or into this 25-minute TV show.
That's an interesting question. We should at some point look back and see like which ones are all the only other one that we like that I remember for sure was based on a short story was Time Enough at Last. And that one I think translated pretty well, but it also had a lot of themes and stuff already in the short story, because I actually went and read the short story after.
Oh,
that deal with stuff that Serling was already into in terms of the themes of loneliness and the irony of getting what you want and that sort of thing was already sort of baked into it. And so that's a really interesting question. We should do some research on that and sort of figure out like which episodes are based on short story, and over the long run, is there any correlation? There's also, when you crank out episodes every single week, and I think very few TV shows have not had this, where sometimes you just get a clunker and you move on to next week.
True. So this was another one that had a very unlikable protagonist, like I mentioned. And so that in conjunction with some other elements of this episode remind me a lot of Escape Clause, the one where one of the least likable protagonists that was the hypochondriac, and he did a deal with the devil where he wouldn't die. And like in Escape Clause, I noticed that this was, all these Twilight Zone episodes are pretty serious, but like in Escape Clause, there was some pretty wacky music that was happening underneath this episode. Once again, it was like do 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 as he's like walking around getting chased by the mob, and all this stuff is happening. I just noticed that again, that like in Escape Clause, we had an unlikable protagonist, and then I'm sorry about my idiot dog barking in the background, that there was also this ridiculous kind of wacky music that didn't really fit the episode.
Yeah, I want to talk about the music for a second, because it really jumped out at me, particularly in the opening. It felt very not what we're used to in the Twilight Zone, and it to me was really reminiscent of something. And I actually sat here for a while trying to think of what specific, like there's some movie or TV show that it's like exactly like that. It was like sparking feelings from in my head, but I couldn't place the episode. The two things I got that kind of got the closest to me, although I don't think I'm hitting whatever the sort of uber one is in my head that this really was reminding me of, and like, oh my gosh, I know this music. One was the opening from the studio version of Touch of Evil. So not when they went back and redid it to try to achieve Orson Welles' vision, but actually the studio release starts with this sort of single piece of music playing through the whole long opening tracking shot. And that's, if you haven't seen that movie, that's worth checking out. And it's a really interesting film too, in its history, that is Orson Welles post Citizen Kane, being an accomplished filmmaker at that point, and made this film, and the studio kind of took it out of his hands at some point, and he wrote these very lengthy memos about what they should change that they didn't. But then more recently, I think within maybe 20 years ago, after he was gone, some film preservation people and filmmakers went back and used all his notes and tried to reconstruct the movie to what he had wanted it to be. Anyhow, I digress. The opening of the studio's release of that, the music reminded me very much of this, and I think it was this sort of like the time period hit, the little bit of jazz flair, a little bit, the drums felt almost like a little Latin to it. And the other thing, in a totally different vein, it reminded me of the 60s Batman TV show score. Like not the na-na-na-na-na-na Batman like theme song, but the actual like score during the episodes sounded a lot like this. I don't know if you had anything else or if you, but like, I was like, I know this music. It's like exactly like something else. And it really bothered me that I couldn't think of what it was. If anyone out there knows what I'm thinking of, like send a message at us because it's bugging me.
Yeah, I didn't connect it to anything specific other than that episode Escape Clause, but and even not necessarily that the two sounded alike within those episodes, but I just got that same feeling where I was like, this doesn't really fit this episode at all. There are a lot of things that were not necessarily super fun about this episode. I think
while we're still at the beginning, the one other thing I'd like to do in reference in terms of referencing better movies that this reminded me of is there's sort of these like there's a lot of canted angles, like the tilted shots where it's not level, kind of throughout the whole episode. And it's like so stylized in your face. I almost wondered if Bram was trying to like distract us from the plot not making sense.
Could be.
But it starts at this cityscape, and there's a nice bookend at the very last shot of the episode where it is down on the street looking at the dead body and the father with the gun and tilts back up to the same cityscape. So there's a nice bookend. But at the beginning, when it tilts down from the cityscape, then it just pans across all these neon signs, and it's this sense of like being in the big city, and there's all these glowing signs advertising all these different things, and just like crammed together, like 50 of them in a 10-second pan or something. Both of those numbers are probably wrong, but a lot of them crammed in, and it reminded me of the fantasy sequence in Singing in the Rain, which is one of my favorite movies. There's a part towards the maybe like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through where they're talking about like what's going to happen in this movie we're making, because the whole movie is like behind the scenes in the film industry. And Gene Kelly's like, well, I got this idea. It'll be like this. And it goes into like a 20-minute chunk that has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. It's like just him, a big dance musical number for him, totally disconnected from the plot because they wanted to get it in. And then it comes back like, well, we'll see if we can get that done. But there's a part where the sort of young kid fresh out of the country or whatever comes into the city, and it goes by sort of all the neon lights, neon signs, like just like that. And that was very much like what they had here. And I was actually wondering if there was like a connection between the two, because this would have been Singing in the Rain would have been in recent memory. It's early 50s. And if Bram was like trying to emulate or pay homage to that or something.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that it also was done in Singing in the Rain, because what it reminded me of, that sequence with the neon signs, was when Bart Simpson is singing Springfield, Springfield, and about going to Springfield, and it has that, big lights city montage going on behind him. I don't even remember what episode it's from The Simpsons, but it was
Springfield,
right? New York's that way, buddy. Right.
Thanks, kids.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what it reminded me of, and I don't know where The Simpsons pulled a lot of things from a lot of different sources. So I don't know if maybe they pulled it from Singing in the Rain, maybe they pulled it probably from Singing in the Rain, I would suspect. But
and I would think probably like, because Simpsons often will sort of like collage or pastiche several different things together, and that was probably like they're trying to emulate that era of the big movie musical and like stealing that visual from Singing in the Rain, and obviously the song New York, New York from a different movie, and then there's other bits within that sequence that are stolen from other things from around the same time. Right. So that probably is a Singing in the Rain reference, is what they're going for. Anyhow.
Also, like Escape Clause, this guy was using...
Maybe we should just replay the Escape Clause episode.
I think I would have preferred to watch that one again. this is another one where the protagonist uses his power for, I know we alluded to this at the beginning, but for evil instead of good. And in Escape Clause, he was just running insurance scams. And in this one, he was kind of a similar vein. He was trying to get money from the gangster. He was trying to sleep with that girl. And he even at one point says the line, he's like, I can change my face any way I want to. I might as well take advantage of the dames or something. I was like, oh boy. It was very self-indulgent, and also as Serling alludes to in his opening narration.
Yeah, and I want to get back to what you just said there for 1 second, but I would actually go a step further in the comparison to Escape Clause, not just using this amazing power for evil instead of good, but not even using it well for evil. Like, if you could put on any face you wanted, there are much better ways you could get, easier ways to get a lot of money or get the girl or whatever. And he's like going about the most difficult, convoluted, not well thought out ways.
Yeah, getting involved with the mob. Why would you think that would be a good idea? Like, oh, I know this mobster. Yeah, it was very strange.
Always a good decision. So I have a question for you about the thing with the girl, and putting aside the whether we liked the episode or anything not. Can you just explain to me what he was actually trying to do? Because I was really super confused about what his angle was there.
I'm almost positive it was to sleep with her. And
then why doesn't he just say, like, after you're set, let's go back to your place or something? He like does this whole thing like I'm going to buy tickets to Chicago and meet me at the train station. It's like this whole weird, I don't know.
Because 1960, which is the first day of 1960, I think, was a simpler time, and we needed to make an honest woman of her. He had to take her across the country by train to then sleep with her in a sleepy Chicago suburb so her parents wouldn't find out about it. I don't know. It was so weird, but he basically does admit that that's the whole point that he's using it. And the weird thing
wait a minute. Before you move on from that, though, I almost read it the other way, because he goes outside and he has this kind of conversation with himself, very oddly, literally just standing in the dark talking to himself. And it's kind of like, well, why shouldn't I get the girl? And it read to me, and you're probably right, because the way I read it implied there was going to be some follow through later in the episode. But it sounded to me like he had some scam he had been planning to run that he always does. And he was like, kind of like, well, maybe why can't I just get the girl instead of doing this scam, like go live a life with her or something. And then was going to have to like ultimately decide to do that or not. Like I didn't get that was his original ploy, but maybe I'm just like dumb. I don't know.
I don't know that it was, but like that's how I read. That's how I interpreted it.
That's fair.
And
yours makes more sense with how things ended up.
It was ridiculous. And like, even if that was your scam and you're like, I'm going to use this great new power for just hooking up with chicks, why would you not just be like, well, I'll just make myself Cary Grant or whoever
right,
was
turn
like
into some celebrity instead of like bringing back her dead lover.
It was very strange. It was a very strange. And while we're on this topic, once again, we've kind of reverted to a lot of very non-reactive people in the Twilight Zone. Like, she was like, oh my God, I thought you were dead. But then kind of it's like, well, I'm glad you're back. It was another reversion of all the when he went to talk to the mob boss, he's like, oh yeah, put bullets in me and threw me in the river and I'm not dead. And everyone's kind of like, oh, all right. Well, I'm still not going to pay you. It was so disappointing.
The mob boss like, I'll pay you 20%, but not the rest.
Right. It was so strange and disappointing kind of after the three pilots come back. What the heck's the name of that one? I'm having a hard time pulling old episodes. The three astronauts come back.
And then there were three.
And then the sky was open. And then the sky was open.
And then the sky was open. There you
go. The reactions in that one, particularly Clegg or whatever, the main character's reactions were so real. And then the last few episodes, I feel like we're just reverting back to, this is completely normal and everything's fine, even though these weird sci-fi things are happening. And like you said, the cop at the end, when they're going, he was literally in the revolving door with this guy and he gets outside the revolving door and he's a totally different guy. And speaking of that, while we're on all the little nitpicky, annoying things in this episode, he could have changed, to my knowledge, he didn't have to change his face into an existing human being, and he didn't like need to be looking at a picture because he just changed into some rando in the revolving door. But when he's in the alley getting chased by the thugs, before he sees the poster of the boxer, he's sitting there like, think of a face, think of a face. It's like, just literally just do anything, just any face, a famous face, a non-famous face.
He apparently has his own default face. Like, right. Why not just go to that?
Yeah, that was frustrating. So is this another really dumb protagonist that we're seeing too? Or is this just, we have to keep this plot, we have to create some tension in this plot because the guys are sneaking up on him with this giant matte painting behind them, and we need to create the tension of him not being able to change in time. But frankly, he was such an unlikable protagonist. The worst case scenario was that they catch him and shoot him, and we're like, all right, great, you deserve this.
we were rooting for the goons, actually. Yeah. Just shoot him already. You know, and also I was thinking with the goons, and I'm now putting more thought into the plot of this while I was watching it than the writers apparently did, because there are much bigger plot holes. But just the way the scene was, he like runs out of the mob boss's room right as the two goons come in, and the boss is just like, get him, and they like start running after. They don't know who he's supposed to look like. If you're a goon, if that's your job, whoever you've been, and there's nobody else on the streets. Like, they follow him clearly into this alley. There's clearly nobody else there. If you're a goon, you grab that guy, take him back to the boss,
and like, here's the guy.
And if the boss is like, this is the wrong guy, you're like, then he eluded us, we're sorry. You don't go back and say, well, we cornered him, but he didn't look like a random person that we thought might have been who you wanted us to catch, so we didn't grab him.
Right. How about the fact that this is another insane resolution to this episode? This reminded me of The Lonely when they shoot the sex robot because
in the face.
Right. Like the resolution to the dad being mad at the boxer, which was kind of a neat idea that like, oh, he turned into a person that has this horrible history and is disappointing his father. He must have run off from his father or whatever. Well, he didn't run off that far because he was a famous enough boxer to have his poster up in the back alley in the city. But the dad, that's the resolution, is he shoots his own son like a dog in the street. I was like, what is this? And it's this little old man. He's a newspaper salesman on the street that finds a revolver to shoot. And not only that, because they initially meet, and then he goes apparently and gets his revolver and waits for him to come back and shoots him in the street. It was very insane.
Doesn't he wait for him to come back? He somehow figures out where the guy who has a different name and a different face was staying.
Right.
Waits outside that place for him after he goes and gets his revolver. Like, well, and it's funny, when in my notes I actually wrote, when the cop showed up, I'm like, this is super like Deus Ex Machina, you know, just like hand of God come in and like, well, I guess now we'll get arrested, because there's no explanation for how the cop found him or what he was doing. And then he comes out and they like double down on it, like, oh, he's going to escape from the cop, and then we'll just throw in another random coincidence that the dad's out here now.
Right. And
I picture the dad was just like wandering the streets of the city with this revolver out and just happened to be passing as he ran out.
And you're absolutely right. It seemed like his default face, despite maybe being an unlikable person, wasn't in trouble with anyone. So as you're trying to get away from the cop, why not just go back to your default instead of this guy that you've already met the father. You already know this guy has a and I'm sure he wasn't expecting the father to shoot him, but he already had a complicated relationship that I would try and avoid. And it was weird. The whole thing was weird and it was pretty nonsensical.
It was pretty nonsensical. Yeah. I did make so I made a prediction that turned out to be correct, but in a completely incorrect way. So like just at the end of the voiceover, a couple minutes in, one of the things I noted that was unusual is usually there's like a surprise, like the Twilight Zone element, you know, where something supernatural or sci-fi or whatever happens, kind of ends up being a reveal. Like usually we start in a realistic or concrete sort of world, and then something strange comes in later.
That's
and this one,
exactly how I teach people how to improvise. Start with real and then find the weird
right?
thing.
And this
That's how
one,
the
in the
UCB
opening
school teaches it.
voiceover, it's like he can change his face, and we see him change his face. Like, okay, so then I'm
Right.
like, well, this is so we already know what the sort of Twilight Zone bit's going to be. We're just trying to figure out like the plot or message. And my guess at that point, because he's got this suitcase full of newspaper clippings about people who died, was that he was going to impersonate those dead people to collect their money or somehow take advantage of that. But one of these people had somebody else who wants to kill him, and when he puts on that face, that person kills them. That was my guess.
That's a good point. If they would have kept that fact that this guy was essentially a shapeshifter to the end of the episode, and we were seeing all these weird things happen, like, wait a minute, how'd they lose that guy? How'd they lose that guy? How'd they lose that guy? And at the end, we realize it's all the same guy. Now, I don't think that would have been made for a much better episode, but it would have been more interesting.
It would have at least held our suspense, because the only suspense
Yeah.
I had was trying to figure out what his scheme was, which was never really explained because there wasn't one.
No, there was bang a hot girl and steal money from the mob. I don't know.
Look, if
I don't
that's your
understand how
plan, you
didn't
got to
follow
do it
that.
the other way. First, you steal the money from the mob to make sure you have the money for the train ticket so that you can go bang the hot girl in Chicago.
No, he was waiting for the guy from What You Need to give him a bus ticket, just out of the blue. I hope all these worlds collide later on. Well, Mark, this might be a shorter episode for us. Do you want to take a break now?
Sure, let's take a break. Okay, so welcome back to our discussion of our favorite episode we've ever seen, apparently. The Four of Us Are Dying. I wanted to at least
The two
mention...
of us were dying while watching this episode.
I definitely have some more critiques, but I did want to mention a couple things that were done well since we've been so negative on this. I mentioned that the writing I didn't think was good in terms of the story. There was one great little interchange when he goes to the club and meets Maggie, who was the girlfriend of the musician who was deceased, and they're talking. And kind of after she's over her shock of seeing the guy she thought was dead, as Mike noted, very quickly over it. So he says, I came to check out the mourners and read the obituaries. How'd they feel about the deceased, huh? What kind of tears? And she says, you came to the right place, Johnny. I have a room full of buckets. I'm like, that is awesome. Buckets of tears. I just love it. So I thought that was good. And the other thing I mentioned briefly before, but again, a shout out to the director kind of doing what they could with what they had. There are some, remembering that we're on a TV budget and this is late 1950s, pre any sort of CGI or computer graphics or really any sort of post effects that they're going to be doing on a TV show at this point. There's some pretty clever ways that they do the face changes where like the camera will be on one face and on his face, and it like in one case tilts down to show him like stubbing out his cigarette, and the hand comes back up and puts the cigarette in the mouth, and it's a different face. And there's a couple neat, the transitions they did I thought were pretty clever, other than the very end when they're kind of, he's lying dead on the ground and they're trying to show all four of them dying, and so they just sort of do these blur dissolves between all four faces. And I was like, man, if they had morphing technology at that point, that's what they need. And I was thinking of the end of Terminator 2 when the T-1000 is in the molten metal and like cycles through all its people it had impersonated, like it's, it's malfunctioning and just cycles through all the different faces. And that's kind of what the effect they wanted, and just no way to execute at this point. The technology was not there.
Yeah. Since you kind of talked about some production stuff, one of the things that stuck out to me, this episode was aired on New Year's Day, and the last episode was aired on right, and the last episode was aired on Christmas Day. And I can't imagine in this day and age that there would be a new episode of a currently running popular well, I don't know how popular it was at the time, but that would air on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. There's no way, right?
Well, because this is before A Christmas Story came out, so they didn't have anything to loop for 24 hours straight on Christmas Day, and this was before college football got big and all the bowl games were on the first, so they had something put on. No, that's absolutely right. Like, no network wants to air a new episode of something on a day with really low TV viewership at this point. They're going to hold it for a better time. So That is interesting. I wonder how many, I'm sure we could find this information with a minimum of research, so we probably won't, but it'd be interesting, like what at that time was like the average length of a TV season, like how many episodes per season do they do? And it's got to be a lot more than, not even now, but even just like, early 90s when a TV season was like 26 episodes, and now a lot of them are, they'll do a half season of 13 or a full season of like, 20 or 22, or if it's, HBO or Netflix or something, they'll do like 6 or 7 episodes. But I'm wondering if a full season then was, 30, 40, something like that.
There's a lot of, they're not numbered, unfortunately. There seems to be a lot of season 1 Twilight Zone episodes, if that helps you at all.
It helps minorly, I guess. It doesn't tell us an actual number.
Well, there must have been, so there's 5 seasons and there's 164. Wait, no, sorry, that's the reviews. There's 100 and something, I don't know.
We'll find out by our next
season. There's 156 episodes, so that's 30
4
plus.
Seasons? Yeah, that's over
seasons.
30.
Right. So, and I don't know if they had fewer episodes in the later seasons when they went after season 2, I believe, is when they went to hour-long episodes, so maybe they did fewer at that point.
Maybe after they saw this episode, we're like, we need to wrap this season up because we're out of ideas.
Yeah.
I will mention one other thing with the production that was not a good thing. So when they first show him and he has all these obituaries in his kind of spilling out of his suitcase, cut out of the newspapers. And I looked, and there's one for the musician, and then there's like 4 for this mobster, and it's the same obituary and the same picture and everything. And I was like, this is either really lazy production design, or this is the beginning, remember? So I still had hopes that this was going to be up to the Twilight Zone's usual standards. I'm like, is there going to be some relevance where he needs multiple copies of the same obituary? And the answer is no. They just like somehow forgot to make more than 2, and then like, oh, we'll just copy this one a bunch and throw those all out there together.
Yeah.
I did like, this is, I guess, kind of for me wrapping up anything interesting I had to say about the episode. I don't know if the stuff I said before was interesting, but kind of last one. To think something about the time period when he's talking with Maggie about like where they'll go, like we can go anywhere, like Chicago, Detroit, San Francisco. And I just love the idea of like, can you imagine today someone's like, you can go to Chicago or Detroit or San Francisco. Those are not all equally appealing options. And
I'm biased
for them,
but
they
I would
kind of, yes, obviously your first choice would be Chicago to see Mike and go check out his theater.
Yes.
And then Detroit and San Francisco, that's a tight race for second, right? I mean, you got like the Golden Gate Bridge and beautiful weather and sights to see, or Detroit.
Well, you do have the same number of homeless people, I would say, in both cities, but
the difference in San Francisco is the homeless people are all like multimillionaires and still can't afford a place to live out there.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a couple things that I thought reminded me of modern takes on some of these things. Obviously, there's a million versions of this story that have come out. You mentioned, I didn't even think of T2, but Terminator 2 is probably one of the closer ones to that, where the T-1000 is able to just become, and that was the scary thing about the T-1000. He could just kind of become whoever your loved ones. He became that kid's mom and talked about Wolfie. But the thing,
and he has like, probably more of a moral center than this character too, and a better idea of what to do with his ability.
Yeah. The Thing, I know we've mentioned on this podcast before, John Carpenter's The Thing in the 80s was very, and then you see, Clayface is a Batman villain that has the same ability. Mystique from the Marvel universe has this same ability. And there is something very frightening about that idea of not being able to trust people, not being able to trust who you're seeing and talking to, even though because I think the thing that you count on and rely on being able to trust more than anything are your own eyes, your own senses, and to not be able to trust those could be a horrifying thing to explore. But this episode obviously did not do that at all, right? Yeah,
and there's also the other thing that I thought would have been a more interesting direction for this to take is not just being able to change the face, but the idea of sort of assuming somebody's life. So, if Johnny does end up getting on the train with Maggie, like at some point she's going to realize it's not the same guy, right? Because he's not going to have the same back knowledge. They haven't been through the same experiences. She'll reference something and he'll have no idea what she's talking about. And I was thinking of movies not where people change their faces, but where people like assume an identity. So like Catch Me If You Can, which is
Mr.
more
Ripley.
like he's assuming sort of jobs. Yeah, and Talented Mr. Ripley was the primary one. And I was thinking in that one, do you remember the kind of detail he goes into in terms of trying to learn how to mimic somebody and sort of be that person? And I found it so bizarre in this one. And I know we always talk about, well, they only had 20 minutes, but certainly they had better, they had better ways to spend the time than they did. So I'm going to go ahead and call him out for it. He seems to know a lot about these people and their background and what happened just from reading an obituary. Like when he goes to the mobster, he knows somehow where the mob boss lives, who, like, that he was the one who ordered him killed, how he was killed, which maybe that would be in the obituary, although he knew more details than you would think, but also like what the guy's tastes are like.
Just the fact that he owed him money.
Yeah, and then he knew what his percentage was supposed to be.
Right.
Like, he just has information he shouldn't.
Absolutely.
And there's no explanation for it.
Yeah, and even if there was stuff that was printed in the news stories, printed in the papers when that guy, obviously would go beyond the obituary, but they're not going to print how he was killed, and they're not definitely
and that
not
he had
going
just
to print
delivered a satchel and was owed 20% by the mob boss.
Well, and they're definitely not even going to print in the paper that, hey, this mob boss did it. And if they did, this guy would certainly be on trial for it at this point. Like it was very, very, very bizarre. But something that made me think off of, and this was a perfect kind of segue into this. This was reminding me a lot. When you talked about not having any background, this reminded me of like a very bad version of Quantum Leap, which was one of my favorite shows in the 90s. And they do keep talking about rebooting it. And if they do, I demand that we watch that on this podcast, because I love that series. But that was part of the gimmick, that Sam Beckett would leap into these different people, and he would look like them and just have to take over their lives and have to figure it out. And now he had Al to kind of give him some, that's your girlfriend, which was a cool dynamic between the two of them. But he was kind of faking it until he made it, for lack of a better thing on it, and working on the fly, which was kind of the neat gimmick of Quantum Leap. And then until he figured out, obviously, how to solve their problems and leap into the next person. But this reminded me of like if Sam Beckett was evil and was just trying to bang girls and make money.
Yeah, and though they were smart enough though to have the device of Al there to give him some explanation, something to go off of. This jumped out at me right from the start when he first sits down with Maggie. His first line, I don't remember it exactly, but it's something like, you shouldn't drink if you don't drink well.
Yeah.
And it was like something that had this total connotation. Like if we had just seen him do all this digging on Johnny and really figure out his life, like that felt like an inside joke between the two of them. Like that was his bona fides, that it really is him. Like that's something he's used before. And it just was completely out of nowhere.
And going back to him hitting on her, I got a very creepy, like particularly Revenge of the Nerds, but very creepy, like 80s guys just trying to trick women into sleeping with them vibe from his interactions with her. And in Revenge of the Nerds, the guy, the main guy from Revenge of the Nerds, sleeps with the head cheerleader by dressing up like Darth Vader and making her think that she's sleeping with her boyfriend, which is a very troubling, very, very troubling scene. And I just got that same vibe. There's a lot of 80s movies where that was essentially the thing. Oh, these poor nerd guys just trying to get laid and essentially trick girls into sleeping with them. And it was a little bit tricky to get over that his first use of his really amazing, well, I don't know about first use because maybe he's been doing this all the time, but of his ability to change his face. This was a weird episode.
Yeah, it is interesting. You're totally right about so many 80s movies having that vibe. And even before that, because I think of things like Animal House.
True.
And
peeping on the girls.
The sort of raunchy, raunchy guys comedy, or Porky's, directed by the same director as A Christmas Story, oddly enough.
Huh.
And then by the I would say mid-ish 90s, I'm trying to remember when like American Pie and stuff came out, you start to get people playing with that same genre, but with more agency for the female characters, although they still focus on the males.
Yeah.
But that it becomes less about tricking them and more about building these relationships, but still getting to that point where they sleep together. And I'm thinking of in Superbad where isn't there a line or something? And I love Superbad. It's a great movie. There's something where he's like trying to like get her drunk, and he's like, I was trying to get you drunk so I could sleep with you or something like that. And he's like, you could just talk to me. I don't have the line right, but there's some sort of vibe of that interaction where they're like, that was his whole plan, is like have this party, get her drunk so she'll like him enough. And obviously and then it's Emma Stone's character, and she's like not drinking at all. And she's like, are you guys doing this crazy stuff?
Well, in American Pie, let's not completely forgive that, because he still did broadcast Shannon Elizabeth taking her clothes off on the internet. So there was still some weirdly troubling things, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, like I think that was kind of the start of like trying to get this more evened out or balanced out or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not that they really ever succeeded with it.
No, but you're right. There was at least a little bit more self-awareness than, because I truly think the Porkies and I think that they thought that everything that they did was fine. and for sure it wasn't at the time, and it certainly isn't now. So, well,
you mentioned the Darth Vader thing. The other thing that they never really discuss is obviously she would know it's not Darth Vader because he was like, had everything burned off down there. He's just a robot.
Well, I don't think she thought it was actually Darth Vader. I think she thought
she didn't think that was really? Oh my God. I think that changes my whole conception of Revenge of the Nerds. I thought she really thought it was Darth Vader.
I think she thought she was sleeping with the neighbor from Married with Children after Steve. So that's kind of all I had, Mark, unless you have other thoughts. Do you want to get to the closing narration?
Yeah, I think we need to wrap on this episode and never review it again.
Okay. And I actually do have one thought on the closing narration that I'll get to, but here's the closing narration. He was Arch Hammer, a cheap little man who just checked in. He was Johnny Foster, who played a trumpet and was loved beyond words. He was Virgil Sterig with money in his pocket. He was Andy Marshak, who got some of his agony back on a sidewalk in front of a cheap hotel. Hammer, Foster, Sterig, Marshak, and all four of them were dying. And that's the end of it. And when I read As I Knew Him, Anne Serling, Rod Serling's daughter, mentions that there are only a handful of episodes that don't end with some variation of him saying "in the Twilight Zone." And to my recollection, this is the first one that we've seen.
It definitely is, because I noted that, because I was almost like waiting for say all four of them were dying in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and it was almost like deliberate, because it would have fit, I think. All four of them were dying in the Twilight Zone because those guys were all dying in this one guy. So it would have fit. And I feel like it was a deliberate omission. And I was wondering why. Maybe he knew this was not a great episode.
I had the same thought, and I'd really like to think it's not that, but that he was just like, we're not attaching the words the Twilight. Like, maybe you'll just forget that that's what you were watching in this episode, and you'll tune in next week.
And I didn't really have any advanced thoughts about that, but I wanted to point it out and point out that because Anne Serling doesn't specifically launch into why, but that at least not that I recall when I was reading it, but I thought that was interesting, something that she mentions in that book, and then I just finished it about a week or two ago, and then not 2 episodes later, we see the first example of that.
Well, let's stick a pin in that, and next time this comes up, let's, like, one that doesn't end within the Twilight Zone, let's see if we saw any patterns. And it's certainly not, as you mentioned, because that couldn't have fit at the end of this episode.
Right.
It would make perfect sense there. It would actually make more sense than many of the places where he does use it.
Couldn't agree more.
So that'll be interesting to keep an eye out for.
Let's rate the sweat now.
1. I don't think I noticed any.
We had 2 question marks, so I'm fine with 1 because I don't think excuse me, I don't think I noticed anything really either that was
In
notable.
fairness, I was so busy trying to figure out what the hell was going on and why I should care that I wasn't paying attention to the sweat. But let's go with one or 1.5 and move on.
Let's say 1. You shouldn't and you shouldn't. So let's say our sweat level is 1. And then I think we'll probably be pretty close on this too. Let's rate this episode.
Well, I was leaning towards a 5, and then I watched the episode, and
5 on the title.
I'm going to give it a 1.5 just because I'm going to give John Brom some credit for some of the cool camera moves with revealing the face changes and the way they were able to do that with no digital technology. But I would be easy to convince to give it a straight 1.
I'm fine with a 1.5 because and one thing I did actually forget to mention that I mentioned this with when he got hit by the car, What You Need. That it was probably pretty shocking to see a guy in 1960 gunned down in the street by his father. So maybe
you weren't around in the 60s, but people were just on every corner gunning down their kids. That was
especially probably in Chicago. But the so I thought that was also something to at least consider. Maybe give this episode a little bit of credit for being somewhere. So I'm fine with a 1.5.
You know, something else I'd mention on the ratings, though, often when we have some disagreement on the ratings, which I don't think we do on this one, we end up talking a little bit, and it's kind of how we interpreted, like, did you feel like, one of us felt like there was too much plot, but the other one thought that the ideas raised were interesting or something like that. And a lot of times there's something, we end up in this place talking about, like, well, what did this leave you thinking about? And this one, this would make me lean more towards the 1 than the 1.5. Like, this just doesn't leave me thinking about anything interesting. Even the ending voiceover didn't like try to raise it to some larger theme or anything like it usually does. Just like, nope, they're dead. The end.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Well, let's hope we get on the upswing after a couple episodes we weren't such big fans of.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of that, are you ready to guess along what next week's episode is going to be?
Yes, I am.
Okay. The title
What am I going to say? No.
That their podcast comes to a screeching halt. Next week's episode is entitled Third from the Sun.
Well, I'm going to guess it's not a prequel to the TV show Third Rock from the Sun. I do know the third planet from the sun is Earth, so I'm betting it's something about that. And I'm gonna say it's. I'm gonna go out on a limb here because I've been waiting for some aliens in Twilight Zone, and say that it's some aliens come to visit Earth, and they're like space tourists.
Okay, we will find out. Okay, thank you for listening. We'll see if Mark is right next week. This was Deja Reviewed. As we said, next week's episode is episode 14 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, titled Third from the Sun. Feel free to leave us a rating and a comment wherever you're listening to us, or you can reach out to us at dejareviewed.com, and we hope that you tune in next week.
Deja Reviewed.